Happy Monday. I hope my sound is good. I know the other day I never do anything to this mic other than pull it back and forth. So awesome, Truett. Thank you so much. Um, yeah, technology. Boo hiss. It's Monday. It is a federal holiday here in the U.S. Martin Luther King Day. In honor of his birthday. And I have to say, you guys know I don't like to get political. However, I have been signed up for the America 250 mailing list for quite some time. There's a whole, I don't want to say it's an agency. It's not an agency, but it's like a committee, a group of people. I think it's fairly large group of people, all in kind of different aspects of 250. Um, and they've been pumping out some stuff about volunteering just in general. So apparently there's this thing. So for 2026, if you do volunteering, you can go in there and log your volunteer work, which I don't know. I mean, I think that's a good thing, but also it's kind of I don't know. And today there's a message came out about, Dr. King and volunteering, and I'm like, stuff coming out from our current federal government like that. It's kind of laughable. And I'm all for the idea of what Dr. King stood for and what his beliefs were, and this idea of volunteering, because I think it's important in any event. I won't say more than that, but I just thought oh, the hypocrisy. Anyway, um happy Martin Luther King Day. So yesterday, I was gonna do something different today, and I don't know. And I decided to pull some quilts out that I wanted to look at from the International Quilt Museum. They're out of a book, and I'll show you this book in a second. I think I mentioned it the other day. It was it was a one of my Christmas purchases, and it's from the University of Nebraska Press. And once a year they do this 50% off thing. So, this is like a $90 book that I got for $45, so it was a pretty good deal. It's a mountain of a book. So, we'll look at that in a minute. Okay, true. So I'm in the 50s today. That's good. That's good. Yeah, I have my mic it's almost blowing out at the end when I speak loudly. So, hopefully it's good. If anybody is experiencing anything different, let me know. Anyway, so we'll look at these quilts. We also have to decide what is our next book, and I've got two on my desk to show you. I don't know. I thought I had a preference, but I think I don't. So, both books that I have on my desk are interesting that I want to start reading. So, I'll give you guys the pros and cons, and you tell me what you want to hear about. First thing, though, I thought I would do something fun. I don't do a whole lot of demonstrations. And this one is a pretty easy one. I didn't take pictures. I don't have an overhead camera. I'm just gonna be, putting things in front of the screen. But Jill and I did a stitch and glitch this weekend, and we were looking at some stuff. I can't even remember. I'm blanking what we were looking at, but there was this quilt with these insane like curves in this very fine like a vine kind of. And I know some of you were probably there and you saw it, but somebody had asked, how do they even do that? How do they even make those teeny little vines? A lot of times they do it with embroidery. A nice tight chain stitch or a stem stitch makes, very nice curved lines. And depending on the thickness of the thread you use, if you use a pearl cotton, you get kind of a beefier line, and so on. But I can tell you, Baltimore album quilts especially, and album quilts in general, and any kind of quilt that has, a very vine-like border, there's a technique that they use. Now, I'm not going to say every quilt uses this technique, because I will tell you, quilts of antiquity, they did not seem to do much on the bias, because bias cutting it could be said it wastes fabric because, you know, you're basically chopping off like this big chunk of fabric to get that bias. But the way to make the like impossibly tiny lines is this technique, and I'm going to show you. Now some of you are probably like, yeah, I know how to do that, but let's just do this for the you know, for the newbies out there who don't do much hand sewing. This technique can employ some machine sewing, but ultimately I think for it to look best, you have to finish it hand sewed. So here's an example of what I'm talking about. This is just white fabric with this pink, like rainbow like shape. And this is one strip of fabric, and I think this measures, I think it's about 1/4 of an inch. Yeah, measures at 1/4 of an inch. You can get smaller than that, but I think you're really pushing it if you get smaller than that, with the stability of the fabric. If you have a fabric that's really tightly woven and very thin, and I can think of some fabrics I have. I feel like art gallery fabrics sometimes are like this. They're like they just have a different hand, and I think it's because they're just woven. The fabric is woven tighter, and it's kind of thinner. This is Kona cotton, and Kona cotton is fairly thin, but you know, it's quilting cotton, so it's got a specific like hand and thickness to it that I think is pretty consistent with quilting cotton. But anyway, this is what we're aiming for. So, a couple of tools that I think are helpful. By no means are they necessary, but I think they're helpful. You know, I cut all of my sample pieces literally with a ruler and some scissors. I did not rotary cut. I was like, I just don't feel like dragging out the mat and rotary cutting. So I did all this last night. So the tools: scissors, needle, thread, and this fine product. I may have talked about this before. I bought like a big, like triple pack of it about 2 years ago, maybe. And I gave my mom one bottle of it, and then I kept the other two, and I'm down to my last bottle. Hopefully this is still easy to get. I think it was fairly new at the time, and it is by Faultless, the starch company. Faultless in Niagara, at least here in the US. You know, you can buy those for like, I don't know, at one point you could buy them for 99 cents a can, but I don't know if it's that cheap anymore, but you can get it at Walmart. The problem with those is depending on the heat of your iron and whether you let that starch soak into your fabric, you can get flakes. It can, like, you get flaky stuff. And I don't know. I've had trouble sometimes getting like a nice clean finish with those kind of starches. Although I know lots and lots and lots. Hey, Marianne. I know lots and lots and lots of quilters use the, you know, the cheap discount store starches, and they are perfectly fine. I also know lots of quilters that use Flatter, which is one brand. I think there's Marianne's Best Press is another one. Oh, Marianne's talking about Terrial Magic. Oh, it is supposed to flake. I have never used that. I've heard of people talking about it. Now, that makes like a very firm. It's very firm, isn't it? I can't remember. I know I saw somebody doing like some kind of crafty application for that. But anyway, so this is called Magic Premium Quilting and Crafting Spray. Fragrance and flake free. Oh, it isn't supposed to flake. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, like I said, I haven't tried that one, so I don't know a whole lot about it. But anyway, this is fragrance and flake free, removes wrinkles and flattens seams, reduces stretch for point matching, and improves accuracy for cutting and sewing. And I have to say, heck yeah, this stuff is so good. It like it just it you know, I mean, they say best results, allow the spray to penetrate the fabric. I mean, you really should do that with any kind of spray. So you dry the fabric before pressing. Okay. So I would guess what you're saying is you let it dry. So this you don't have to let it dry, but you want it to like kind of soak into the fabric. In any event, this stuff turns Kona cotton and it's almost like paper. It is so like papery. Especially if you use multiple applications of it. So I This is like probably one of the only like name brand kind of products that I recommend. Everything else, I'm like, go for the cheapest or the best you can afford, you know? Okay, so this is our goal. So what we start with um, is bias cut fabric. And so this is a 1-inch bias strip. And if you're really new here, I know I'm talking to a lot of quilters that are that have a lot of experience, but if you are new here, the difference between bias and straight of grain is simply the direction that the threads in the fabric run. So typically in quilting, you know, and you've got squares, the threads are running these directions, right angle. There is warp and weft here, and you can orient your fabric um, based on the warp and the weft. One is actually technically stronger than the other. I think it's weft. Is weft stronger than the other? You know, guys, I don't remember. I think because I sometimes tear fabric, which is not always a great idea because you can, you know, it can pull. But Kona cotton tears very well. And you can straighten up your grain by tearing. It tears easier across. So I'm thinking it's the warp that tears easier because your warp is going in this direction. Anyway, you don't really need to know all that. Just this is straight of grain. That. However, when you cut something bias, your straight of grain is now at a 45-degree angle. So it's no longer a straight of grain. It's a 45-degree angle. Oh, Druid has some intel. Let's see. Generally, warp threads are stronger than weft threads because they run lengthwise, are held under high tension, and provide the fabric's structural foundation, requiring durability to withstand the weaving process. While weft threads run horizontally, create the pattern, and can be less strong. You know, yes, that makes sense, and I think that is 100% true, but also quilting cottons tear across the weft, across the warp more easily. And I don't know. I don't know why. It just is. If you tried it, so I mean, again, if like imagine your selvage is here, it tears easily across from selvage to selvage versus trying to tear it down the selvage. I don't know. I don't think that that's not necessarily true for other types of woven fabrics. So, okay. So bias cut, and you do this with a ruler to get your best bias cut. Supposedly bias binding is more durable over time. Could be. I don't know that well, I mean, I have a couple of quilts where I've put the binding to the test. And I don't know that either one. I think the best binding on a quilt binding is a doubled binding. And it doesn't really matter to me. It doesn't matter whether it's, less likely to wear. Yeah, and I think that there's pros and cons either way, and in really how your quilt is going to be used. And honestly, a straight of grain binding is easier to deal with if you don't have curves. Although I use a lot of bias binding because a lot of my quilts have curves on the edge. So 1-inch bias strip. Now your next step is to fold that in half. And I've ironed this, I pressed it. So it is folded in half. If you're doing this with printed fabric, you want the print on the outside. So it would be folding it lengthwise, wrong side together. And then if you're going to do a curve, which is the whole reason why you cut bias. If you're not going to do a curve, if you want to do this technique with, just a straight of grain, you can use straight of grain fabric. But utilizing the starch, you can start manipulating this into a curve. And I was able to manipulate this particular fabric with this much of a curve. If I had worked at it for a while, I think I could probably have gotten it like into almost a circle. It just takes a little bit of stretching. You could kind of stretch the edge a little bit, and then, you kind of go at it with your iron. Now, this is something you can't always get this to work out, because especially if you're using a long strip and you're doing one of these. But if you're just using small strips to make stems on flowers, I would always try to suggest that Your convex edge is the cut edge, right? The cut edge is the convex, so the curve. And then the concave edge under here is the fold. And the reason why is that's really how you get this to stretch into curves. Now, if you bring it back the other way, it'll still do the stretch and the curves, but because you've got that folded edge, it wants to resist a little bit, so you kind of have to work at it a little bit more. But bias cutting helps you do this. And like I said, it's just hot iron. You can, starch it up, and then you could even just spray a little bit of water just to keep it like, the starch working. So next, you will sew this down. And I just started stitching, and I used a dark thread so you could see my stitching. And you can see, like, I guess when I ironed this, I didn't get it perfect. So you could kind of see the raw edges here. And your goal in stitching this down is to determine basically how wide you want this piece to be. And let's just call it a stem, because that's essentially what these are often used for, stems. So you want to decide how wide you want that stem to be. And like I said, I'm working with 1/4 inches. So you're going to sew 1/4 inch away from the fold. You can do this with, bigger pieces. It could be 3/4 of an inch, right? Thank you, Marianne. I have to say, I would say my stitches are pretty neat and even, at least on this side. Look on the other side, they're not so. They're my stitches on the back are not the same length as the stitches on the front, and that's just, you have to really practice at that. So anyway, so again, you're stitching away from this folded line as wide as you want that little piece to be. Now, you have to think about this. This piece is only going to fold over so much, right, to cover up that stitching. So like I said, it's a little bit harder to get smaller than 1/4 of an inch. And the reason why is because you have this width of this stem thing, but you have to trim away what is on the other side of the stitching. And the closer you get to the stitching, the less stable it is. And, this original stitched edge could just be barely holding some threads. So you have to think about that. So basically the leftovers that are encased inside here are less than 1/4 of an inch. So if you've got a fabric that's not tightly woven, you could get into a situation where when you trim and you fold over, it's not going to hold together very well, and any kind of, washing or just wear on it will start to pull apart the threads. So once you have this stitch, and what I would say is, if you, like, again, if you're going to use this as a stem of something, you kind of want to maybe lightly mark on your fabric kind of where the stem goes. And your goal, this isn't always easy, but your goal is to get that stitched line on top of whatever that marking is under here. It's not always super easy. You kind of have to eyeball it a little bit and pin it down. And, and the other thing is, once you kind of do your ironing, you can just put a few pins in there to keep the curve. It will want to kind of relax back into a straight-ish piece of fabric. So just a couple pins. It doesn't have to be like super pinned. So do your stitching. Next, you want to trim. And like I said, your goal is to trim away and end up with this little seam allowance here that's a little bit thinner than the part you're flipping over. Okay. And like I said, if you get too close to these stitches, they may not hold. So this is like I guess this is about 1/8 of an inch away. But here, and you have to be very careful with this. So what I would say is pull the back away so that you can really just have this piece standing by itself to clip away. You do not want to cut your backing fabric. Ask me why I know. And a wonderful tool, if you know, and again, I say these things are, none of these tools are required, but duckbill scissors are a wonderful applique tool for trimming away fabric. And this curved piece keeps this tip of the scissors away from the backing fabric. So you would use these, then slip them under there, and then trim. Okay. Last, we fold the edge over, and I would give it a good hard press then, right? And then do your hand stitch to hold that down. And what I didn't mention is the initial stitching, the inside stitching. If you wanted to do that on a machine, you can do that on a machine. And especially if you're gonna trim so close to that sewn edge, a really tight machine stitch actually might help you. So think about that. But yeah, then, you know, once you've folded that over, you can see, fold it over and then stitch along there with your little blind stitch. I mean, you could do it on a machine. It just looks a little messier. It doesn't you know, it doesn't look as fine. It's really easy to get wobbly with the machine. So that's why I do a lot of hand stitching, because my control is not great. Would a zipper foot work for the final sew? Yeah, it could. You just want to make sure like you get as close to that folded edge, you know, you've got the edge that was already folded from the original fold, as close to that as you can without like going off of it. So, but yeah. And like I said, I showed you my first one. You can get pretty tight with these. So, yeah. So you learned a new technique. Yeah, and, you know, I mean, this is the kind of thing, like, you know, this took me like maybe an hour last night to, probably took me more time pressing all the pieces and the fabric itself than it took me to actually stitch these down. So, you know, I think it's worth it. Like, if you think you might want to do some flowers and some applique and, you know, try. The reason why I love this technique, and I've taught this technique a few times, is because it looks amazing. It looks like you are just some kind of brilliant sewist, you know, that you've got these amazing skills. And yeah, I would say that this is probably not a 101 kind of technique. You know, you do need to have some sewing skills and kind of understand fabric manipulation and stuff, but you've done any kind of sewing. Adventurous beginner. Yes, please give this a try. And it's amazing. You know, if people look at this and go, "Oh, your work is just so beautiful." And I'm like, so I hope you guys enjoyed that. I think I might put a little clip together and put it on Instagram. You know, and then the Baltimore album teachers will all be mad at me because I gave away one of their tricks. But that, you know, and like I said, I can't say that every single quilt in antiquity were those little stems made that way. I have literally seen some quilts where, probably more often binding, you know, as they turn like a curved corner, and the binding is cut on the straight of grain. So that straight of grain doesn't want to curve the way a bias does. So they're taking like incremental itty bitty little tucks to kind of get around it. And it's crazy. It's crazy making, you know, I can't imagine trying to do that when you could just cut it on the bias and it's so much easier. So, yeah. Anyway, I think this is just such an impressive technique and it's really not that hard. If you got a good iron. And you know what? I do not iron my clothes. My iron is strictly for my husband irons his clothes, but my iron is strictly for quilting and pressing stuff like this. All right. So, my technique for the day. Let's look at some quilts, you guys. So, let me Let me get this all recombobulated. Oh, come on now. What did you guys think of the opening music? If you were here when I still had the opening music on, kind of lulled me to sleep, but it's very different. The artist was called Delicate Steve, which I kind of liked. It was kind of a like a soft rock slash country vibe. Anyway, always nice something new. Um, yeah, I'll have to. I've been using like an electronic like hip hop stuff for a while, so I'll use Delicate Steve for a few a few streams and see what you guys think. All right, so let's get to looking at some quilts. So this is the book I'm talking about. It is a volume. This is the American Quilts in the Industrial Age, 1760 to 1870. And these are the International Quilt Museum Study Center and Museum collections. Not all, but a good number of these quilts are from the Artis and Robert James collection. And they are the people that kind of gave the first big gift of quilts to the IQM. Druid. Yes. Okay. Absolutely. Yes, it did have some dead vibes, and yes, Bob Weir, right? And I was just thinking the other day, not to digress too much, but I was a big old deadhead when I was in high school and college, and I remember vividly when Jerry Garcia died. And it's terrible. Like, I remember where I was when certain major events happened. I mean, certainly I knew what I was doing 9/11 when we found out, and um, you know, things like that. But I also vividly remember where I was when I found out Jerry Garcia died, where I found out Michael Jackson died, Tom Petty, Prince. So, yeah, Truckin' is a very good Grateful Dead song. I do love some of the deep cuts though. It's been a long time since I've listened to some Grateful Dead. I'll have to pull up my Grateful Dead Spotify later today. Okay, so like I was saying, Artis and Robert James gave the original gift of like, I don't know, it's like 1,000 quilts or something to get the museum started. And I think it was in 2009. I think. Hmm. Oh gosh, yes, I know Druid. It is, yeah. I think when we start, if you have such a deep connection to music, I probably don't have as deep of a connection as you do, but my husband does. And, I listen to all kinds of music. And it is, an artist that you've listened to for like, I mean, in the case of Grateful Dead, and I know how old you are, you're my age, they were performing our entire lives and before. So yeah, it is hard. And I've seen them play many times, over the years, and I saw them with Garcia and without. So, and I think that's something that there's a lot of sadness going on now, and Jill and I talked about that, and she was going through some stuff too, and we really wanted to do our Stitch and Glitch this past weekend just because we're like so much. There's just so much, and you know let's see, today is the 19th. I would say by the 15th, so many crazy things had happened in our country, and not to mention the entire world, that it's just um an article I read, I'm trying to remember, I think it was in the Guardian. And it says we basically are living in a polycrisis world where lots of things are happening. Like, it's not just that they're not made up. There are lots of things happening, but our news cycle is what hands us constant like images and discussion, and and you think about, gosh, even just 20, 30 years ago, it wasn't like that. You might find out about something a little ways down the line, and you didn't necessarily find out all of the granular details. I think as just general people, if you're not in law enforcement or in, high up in government operations and, things like that, or things that are happening in other places that don't really affect you. And now, before I get taken down for saying this, I think that there are things that is important that we all stand up for. Um, I don't believe in treating people different. All people deserve, all people deserve life, liberty, etc. If you do something bad, I think you should be punished for it. Um, but I think it is important to stand up for what we believe in, and so any kind of you know, disparate treatment. And you guys know I'm a crazy feminist. And also, I stand up for the LGBT um, community, and those are things that I will probably go over the deep end online. But I don't do a lot of online about politics and things because I don't want to say stay in my lane, but you have to kind of limit how you put yourself out there. Just because it becomes this burden that is so hard to hold. And I think some people are probably better at it. People that are, more than happy to go out and protest many things. Um, I kind of, again, like I kind of stay in my narrow, my lane, just because it's like all I can handle. Um, and I think that is kind of important. Like you sort of have to have your set of things that are important to you that you will, always stand up for. And then you kind of have to, not to say you don't care, but you kind of have to let the other stuff go. And, you have to hope that there's other people that can give the care to that thing, if you know what I mean. Um, so anyway, and yeah, Marianne is saying speculation has gone wild. That's another problem, and we were at a point today where my son was saying something to me the other day. And I said, I 100% believe what you're saying, but show me the proof. And he's like, oh, people, we just know. And I'm like, but show me the proof. Show me a picture. Show me a video. Show me a document. And the problem is with that kind of proof, and we're talking about people doing bad things here. With that kind of proof, you then have this secondary moment with AI and how easy it is to make false documents and false claims and things. You end up in this position where you're like, okay, I've been shown a picture or a video or a thing, and I don't know if it's real. Could AI have made this? So I mean, what a position we're in, right? You see a thing that you're outraged about and you want to care about, but then you're like, is it real? And yes, morality is taking a beating. I also think common sense and critical thinking has been at an all-time low. So yeah, I don't want to stand on my soapbox too long here. Because, I always promise you guys, I don't proselytize about this kind of stuff. Because I like to keep it on quilts. But, I think that right now I'm kind of throwing myself into any and everything quilting because I can't watch the news anymore. And, like again, Jill said, like we gotta, we ended up canceling quilt nerding last week. She wasn't feeling well, and I was kind of like, do you still want to do, the stitch and glitch? And she's like, oh yeah, we need to. Just because like you kind of have to have community with your people, you know what I mean? And it's like we better together, right? We can kind of get through this stuff when we're together. So anyway, I'm rambling now. Let's get back to the quilts. So, like I said, artist and Robert James, they gave the initial quilt collection, and I believe money. I mean, they were wealthy people. There are a number of endowments out there. I actually was the recipient of a scholarship, an Artist James Scholars Award in 2024, I was so honored. It was so cool. I was just absolutely thrilled. And, I hold that, scholar, Artist James Scholar out there as like in my email signature, because I'm just like, I'm so proud of this. This was like, it was like getting, It's like almost like the quilt world equivalent of like a MacArthur grant or something. I don't know. It was very cool. So this is where I'm trying to get to with the IQM. They have an incredible collection of quilts. I mean, their initial their initial batch that got them started was incredible. And then there have been so many people that have given collections since. Jonathan Holstein is one person. I don't know what Jonathan Holstein is up to now. I think he's in Northern California. But he, is somebody who's been so important in, the quilting revival. And another person, or Gerald Roy is another person. I don't know. I think Gerald Roy's quilts have been going somewhere else. They haven't been going to IQM, but some of Jonathan Holstein's collection is here. They just have such an incredible collection, and it's one of those things. If like make it your pilgrimage, if you can take one trip within the United States, um, I say go to Lincoln, Nebraska, and spend a day or two at the IQM. Because you will see some amazing things. And if that is not in your budget or your abilities, um, go to their website. See if you can borrow this book from the library or an interlibrary loan if it's out of your budget. Because here's the fantastic thing about this book, and there is a second one, 1870 to whatever, I think. But what is in this book? So obviously, gorgeous pictures, lots of supplemental pictures, like historical things, engravings, all kinds of stuff. So you've got all this just wonderful historical stuff. But for each section, oh, and one thing I didn't mention is it is edited by Patricia Cruz and Patricia Cox Cruz and Carolyn Ducey. So from what I understand, Patricia was the original curator, and Carolyn Ducey, I think, came after her, and Carolyn just retired. And I cannot remember the woman that replaced Carolyn. Leslie Levy is another important name at the museum. I don't know Leslie's title. I don't remember her title, but she is still at the museum. So these are names that you may see in publications or just kind of sprinkled about. So that's who these people are. But although Patricia and Carolyn edited this book, they tapped a bunch of people to write little essays in here. And so some of it is kind of the captioning, some of it's kind of essays, and some of the names you will recognize. They are names we've talked about. So Lynn Bassett, she is a person I know. I've heard her lecture many times. I am personally acquainted with her. She is an incredible colleague. Her research is just like knocked me over with a feather. Amazing. So she wrote a whole bunch in here. Virginia Gunn, who is another very important historian who, unfortunately, she passed away last year. But she wrote a bunch in here. And then there's several other names that are, major quilt industry historians that are just major. So without further ado, let's look at these dang quilts. So I'm not showing you the book. I'm not showing you book pages. I'm showing you the website, because here's the wonderful, wonderful thing, is that the IQM has the majority of their collection, I think, online. There was not a single quilt I chose in this book that I did not find online, and they're, searching their collection. So, oops. I just realized, hopefully okay. my keyboard was typing on its own. Okay, so let me hit the screen. Okay, so this is the collection search field, and these are all the quilts that we're going to look at. But just to show you where this is, super easy. Oh my gosh, they just have such amazing, and it's a big space. There's like a very big space, so they can, when they put a quilts up, they put a show up. Like this is like a huge space where they have had like massive quilts in this space. They can put a lot of stuff out. This is the wonderful thing. I mean, smaller museums just don't have the space, and they can only show so many quilts at a time. IQM space is no issue, basically. So you go to collections, and then scroll down here, and you want to go to search. And when you click that explore button, You can look by title, quilt maker. You know, you want to look at a Rebecca Scattergood quilt, Scattergood. Looking for quilts from a particular place. Um, all of these things, techniques. If you know the collection, look at all these are all of the collections they have. Um, Joanna Rose, remember? She's the red and white quilts that was in New York in, was it 2011? That's Joanna Rose. Um, Robert and Artist James, Carolyn Maslumi, some of her collection is there. You know, she's incredible African American quilter. Her quilts are just fabulous. But she's also a collector. So, you know, a lot of her stuff is there. Um, Roland Freeman, he unfortunately, I believe, passed away. It's been the past year or two. But another very important African American collector and researcher. Um, and then some of the other names here I don't really recognize so much. Cummings Marsh collection was probably Michael Cummings. Maybe, I'm not sure. So anyway, but I mean, look at all these names. um, Patricia Cox has her own collection here. Roderick Karakoff, that was one of the slider thing on the front page. The Pooh's collection, that is colleagues, folks I know that manage that collection, the triplets. Um, they're sisters. They're not twins, nor are they triplets. It's just their last name. I always joke about that. I'm like, wouldn't it be funny if they were triplets or twins? Anyway, I'm sure they get that a lot and they probably hate it. Michael James collection, Victoria Finley Wolf. If you're, you know, follow any modern quilting or you are a modern quilter, you probably know her name. Sue Reich, she is a very well known author and also a colleague. She's a AQSG member. Mountain Mist. Those are some cool quilts from I guess, well, I mean, early 20th century. And I actually saw part of that collection when I was in Birmingham at the Festival of Quilts last summer. So anyway, you can look at all these great collections. But what I'm looking for here is the IQM object number, because this book gives the IQM object number for every single quilt in here that's in their collection. There's a handful of stuff that is from other collections, other museums. I think it's mostly though like the pictures of paintings and ephemera and supporting materials, not so much the quilts themselves. But I would say probably 90% of the stuff in this book can be found. So without further ado, let's look at some of these. This is a bit of a haphazard choosing on my part. I was really just paging through the book and I was like looking for things that were like fun and interesting and really caught my eye. So this first one, let's see, I'm trying to remember. I think, okay, I got to remember how. Okay, so we can zoom in that way. So this is a medallion. It's got some chintz going on. We'll look at that. Applique, there's some piecing. Date range is 1830 to 1850. We're going to find a lot of these quilts that we're looking at are kind of early to mid 1800s. Very surprising. This was one of Artist and Robert James quilts. And let's see, it talks about, you know, primarily calico. Binding is the back folded to the front. I always think that's interesting to find out about. But the reason why I chose this is, I mean, first of all, let's start here. You've got this amazing medallion center. And basically a medallion quilt is, you know, you have this, it's some kind of big beautiful thing in the center and then it's surrounded by borders. Like that's a medallion, or it's surrounded by like borders of some sort. So this, you've got all of this amazing piecing in the center to make the sunburst. And then you've got these swaggy things around it, which you know, kind of have a princess feather vibe. Not quite. They're more of a swag. And then in these corners, you have what I'm pretty certain is broderie purse. So that's flowers that have been cut out of chintz and appliqued down. And then beyond that, you have these little like half circle scallopy things, which I'm going to say is more applique. So we got piecing and applique here in the middle. Then we come out another border and look at this. We have these amazing like vine sort of things with tons of leaves on them, or a feather. You can almost say it's a feather. Um, and look at the colors here. We've got a lot of kind of, they were probably much brighter at one time, but just a very pleasing palette of colors. So I would say that's applique. Then we're getting into more piecing because we have this border of stars. And I guess you could say this star right here, that's the corner to that border, that applique border. And so then you have these piece stars. And then you have this border, and I'm not sure whether these urns of flowers, if that is like it could be a border pattern, maybe. This is where my knowledge about chintz kind of falls apart. Or this could have been printed on some fabric and they cut all of those out. So I'm not sure which it is, but regardless, it's this, other border. Then we have the final border, which is, I think, a pretty common chintz border. They look like kind of like sprays of flowers. So this was like so more is more that I had to look at this one in detail. So, my gosh, look at it. And I'm kind of wondering, it's a shame you can't really kind of get a feeling about what the quilting looks like. I think it's a grid pattern. And I'm starting to think that these urns of flowers, because I don't know. I'm really thinking that they may have been cut out because they're just a little bit different. And I don't know. I really want to see the quilt up close, but I'm trying to scroll back and forth here. They're all definitely a little bit different, and then just sort of the way that they're stitched or the way that they're placed. I don't know. So, wow. Right? Okay. So the next one, also a medallion. This one is possibly made in the UK. And these crazy medallion quilts that just border after border, we've seen, or definitely, have an English influence if they weren't actually made there. Date range 1820 to 1840. So old. Now this is interesting. The quilted stitches 5 to 6 per inch. So this is a little bit, those aren't toenail catchers, but a little bit more of, I guess, I don't know, what would you say? Because I don't want to say it's not like fine work, but, a little bit less anal retentive about your stitches per inch, I guess. Also, back folded to front is the binding on this. So, when I'm saying it's back folded to front, it means the backing is cut slightly larger than the front so that it can then be folded over. It's a pretty common binding technique in older quilts. You don't typically get that separate binding until later. So I think that's interesting. This one was also Artist and Robert James's collection. So, but look at all this. Once again, you have some piecing. Well, actually, I don't know that this is actually piecing. This center, those orange peel shapes. And then it looks like these are also orange peel shapes in the corners. Now, that jaggedy line, that red here around the edge here, I don't think that is pieced. I think just, let's see if we get in. Nah, I guess we can't get any closer. What I think, just based on the fact that if you look carefully at these, you can see they maybe don't quite go all the way down to that next border. And the reason for that, and again, this is a guess on my part, but I think it's a pretty educated guess. That is actually called dog tooth, and it is actually appliqued. And it is very interesting because what you do is you take a strip of fabric and you lay it down, and I guess you pin it down, and then you clip it in carefully measured sections. And then you take the fabric and you fold it under to make these dog teeth. And typically you can tell that it's appliqued dog tooth versus pieced, because if you look carefully, you could sometimes see there's like a little bit of curve. There might be a little bit of rounding at the tip. And that's because it's been, it hasn't been pieced. It's been folded. So, and you'll see that a lot in old quilts. So I thought that was really interesting. Actually, I don't think I do have a quilt that has what I think is dogtooth. Not this one. This one is pieced behind me, but also the amount of cool fabrics in here. So we've got rainbow prints, which we looked at the other day, and that's here. And look at these little tiny appliques, and then all of this is pieced, obviously. Prairie points, like, kind of, yeah, but prairie points start off as kind of a bigger piece, and they're folded a little bit differently. So here, let me see if I can just show you on this piece. I'll come back here. So this is how it's done. I'm glad I had some fabric with me today. And now this could be done with a straight of grain, and I would think it's probably always a straight of grain, but you would pin it down to the edge. And then, so got it pinned down at the edge, and you haven't necessarily put this next, border or whatever it is, the next piece on. But you come along and you clip these pieces. So you see, I've clipped them, right? And then just fold it. So kind of fold a little bit of the top over, and then and then you're folding the back down, folding them back to the back. So you can see what I did there. And this is kind of like prairie points a little bit. And then you would applique this. So you see what I did there? And yeah, you get down to that little point, you kind of have a little spot there that's, I guess, technically going to be a raw edge, but what I've seen is they take little tiny, itty bitty little tiny stitches around these. So when I discovered this was a thing, I was like, oh, heck yeah, because like I said, I do not love, I don't love piecing triangles because I'm just not good at it. So I just thought this was such a great thing. So see, and then you just, you just stitch around those like applique. In theory, I think you could probably, again, do it on a sewing machine if you could get really close to that edge. Make sure you catch that edge, and maybe do, as you get down into these convex points, just make sure you be very careful around that, so that gets stitched. But yeah, you learned another thing today. All right, so let's get back here. So what else is in here? Oh, and this wild chintz. I mean, this chintz border is like another, dense. And this corner piece, I think that's lovely. That must be the way that fabric is printed. Let's scroll up here and see what the other corners look like. Yeah, I don't know if did they cut that in a scallop and then piece it down, or is the fabric printed like that? I don't know. I would love to see this in person though. Just all the stuff. So this one is 108 by 97 inches. So this is a big one as well. Let's see, I didn't get a size on this one. Yep, this one was 108 by 107. So these are big boys or big girls. I don't know. Do you gender your quilts? I know some people do. Okay, this one I love because it is so funky. So I have a medallion quilt that was probably made either in Maryland or Pennsylvania, possibly. Is really just a guess, but it is kind of like a mess like this. And when I say a mess, it's just got like a lot going on, and it's not necessarily entirely symmetrical. Um, and I think possibly colors have faded, and we've talked about this. If you have a fabric that's got a fugitive dye, and you've pieced something very nicely, but then that fugitive dye goes and you ended up with a piece of fabric that's like completely white, you know and you wonder, like, why on earth did they put that in there? Or you've got a situation where, based on the dates, they're dyeing blue on top of yellow or yellow on top of blue to get green. What that blue or yellow might be fugitive, so then you end up with a piece of fabric that's no longer green, it's blue or yellow. So you'll see these things in quilts and you're like, why'd they do that? You have to think about the fact that sometimes dye was not stable, and so what you were looking at may not have been the artist's original or the quilt maker's original plan. So I kind of think maybe some of that's going on here. Although, because we're seeing some, what I think are, probably some madder browns, like these are probably madder, I would think. Madder. We've looked a lot at madder. You got these chromium orange and yellow, like this is a different fabric than this one, right? And then you've got some purple in here. I'm pretty sure these points in here are purple. So I'm guessing this quilt is probably in pretty good shape. Um, you're absolutely right. And that is, Marianne, that's one of the reasons why I picked it out as I was flipping through the book, because I'm like, this looks very modern. Um, but then look at this. Look at this border. I love this because it's pretty simple pieced. It's just the two triangles, half square triangles, point to point, tip to tip. And then you've got that square in the middle. And just based on how they kept this blue consistent and then used these other pieces, it looks like it's wrapping around, it looks like it's wrapping around like a pole or something. And then you just have this geese for days, you know. Um, and there's other things in here. Like, I mean, they've definitely used some fabrics in here, just probably based on what they had. Um, so some of this is definitely just probably based on what the quilter had, but um and then the other part is, typically when you see borders that don't carry all the way around, it's because the side that has the less borders is typically the top side of the bed. um it was because the pillows would be there, and this does not appear to be that. This has got, like, it's totally missing two borders on the one side. It's missing is it missing an extra border on this other side? No, I think it's missing a border. And it's not a border that is in the logical place that we would expect it to be. So I don't know what the deal with this is. But this is 78 by 64.5 inches. So it's a little bit smaller. And I mean, who knows? This could be a situation where maybe those borders were cut off for some reason. Maybe they were damaged and they just cut them off and rebound. I don't know. There's many, many, many reasons why you'd end up with something like this. But I just thought it was really neat. And absolutely, it has modern vibes, and that border, that ribbon effect on the border, I thought was so cool. I mean, that alone is what drew me to it. This was also artisan Robert James. This Now, bar quilts, bars, they're strips, and there's a method to the madness typically in the size of the strips. At least in Pennsylvania, a couple of our Pennsylvania gurus, who have studied Pennsylvania quilts for decades, um, kind of have some ideas about how and why these quilts are, the number of colors and the number of stripes, etc. It is because the original fabric, the fabric width was a certain width, and that cut evenly into so many pieces. And so that's why you'll see the specific number, because they've taken long yardage, they've divided it, and then this is what you end up with. Now this one, aside from this fabric with these green trees, they kind of look like palm trees, I guess. I guess that's considered a chintz. But what is really exciting are these pillar prints. Pillar prints are, they're an early 19th century thing. They're kind of weird. It's like there were so many of them. It was definitely like a thing, a trend. This one's particularly pretty because it's this column and then it's got all these roses wrapped around it. I've seen many of them do look like that with flowers wrapped around. Sometimes there be birds in there. Sometimes I know there's one famous one that it's got little cupids, like the little pooty, you know. So I just thought this was really cool. Two fabrics and that's it. And they made this lovely thing. The greens match each other. And I think that's definitely like these two very disparate prints are tied together because of that green. And this is 1810 to 1830. So, at this time period, green was not made of green dye. Green was made of yellow and blue. And then this sort of brown colors probably matter, I would guess. So yeah. And 105 by 80 inches. And this is likely Pennsylvania. So yeah. Um, the binding is interesting. So the top is folded over and tucked in. So it's a knife edge binding. And what that simply means is the edges are just folded over into each other. So just basically back and front are each folded with a allowance that is equal, and then they're stitched together. Sometimes it's literally like a top stitch, particularly when you get into the machine era. A lot of times that knife edge is top stitched with a sewing machine. 1810 to 1830, sewing machine would not have been part of this quilt making because just the 1830 is like around the time I think that Isaac Singer, actually it might have even been in almost 1840 by the time Isaac Singer did his patents here in the US. So anything before like 1840, I'm going to say is not, they're not going to see any like sewing machine action. But after, particularly after the Civil War, you do see a lot of quilts that have machine stitching in them. The quilting itself may not have been stitched on a machine, but the piecing might have been. So and so this is a Jonathan Holstein and Gail Vanderhoof collection. So like I mentioned, Jonathan was an amazing collector, and Gail Vanderhoof, his partner. This one, I just love this one. This one's so fun. Just an album quilt, but it's got this like naivete to it, I guess. Like it's not it's simplified to some degree. The block that I really love is this block, because it's these beautiful vibrant, like what I would say are daisies, but you have that little tiny urn. Which I think is so funny, that itty bitty little urn. Oh, okay. Druid has some details. So Thomas Saint designed the first sewing machine in 1790, patenting a chain stitch model for leather and canvas. So yes, what he designed was a design. It did not actually didn't actually like it didn't actually work. It was not a physical thing. It was designed. The first actual machine, I can't remember where it is. It's in a museum somewhere. I can't even begin to remember. I know I've seen pictures of it. It is basically like a giant like block and it's got this crazy machine contraption on it. Does not really even look like a sewing machine. So that was kind of the first one. And again, this is like turn of the century, turn of the 18th and 19th century. First practical commercially successful machine with a hooked needle and lock stitch was Bartholomew Timonier, 1830s, and then Elias Howe is the first patent, and then Singer's the second patent. So yeah, Elias Howe, his patent did impact the U.S., whereas Bartholomew Timonier did not. And then Singer, of course, then proliferated in the U.S. So yeah, 1840. Yeah. Um, okay, so back to this. This border reminds me very much of a quilt I made. My border's very similar to this. It's like an undulating vine with this kind of skinny leaves on it. Um, it's really interesting here is it. This is a thin, um, a, a thin piece of fabric. I would assume that it's probably made the way that I have shown you because, um, it just looks like it, but I could be wrong. This could have been done straight of grain. Um, Although 1860 to 1870, I don't know. Um, and it is insane when they do this with straight of grain because I guess they stretch and they do little tiny pleats and tucks and it looks amazing. But once you get up really close and look at it, you can see what they did. So I'm really not sure. Um, so these fabrics that are kind of this sort of tan color, those were most likely a different color at some time. Um, Browns and purples, purple kind of turns this brown. Some types of blues turn this brown, or tan. So it was probably did not have very much tan in it at one time. It was much more vibrant. But these are just dyes that have faded or chemically changed over time. But yeah, this also kind of reminded me of some of the Baltimore album teachers of today. Mimi Dietrich is one example where she takes sort of the fundamentals of Baltimore album quilt making and she simplifies them so that the blocks are not so daunting. And while these are still fairly involved, they're not quite as involved as the traditional Baltimore album quilts. And so I see this as just kind of reminding me of some of her work. um but yeah, just a lovely little things. And like I said, that teeny little urn with those giant daisies coming out was just the absolute best. Um, so this one's interesting, and unfortunately we can't see it up close, but it does say it's got applique, reverse applique, cording and stuffing. And so I don't know if that's within the quilting or if the cording itself is within the appliques. And I'm going to assume that the stuffing is also the appliques. They're stuffed applique, not trapunto. Trapunto would be the quilting itself. It says there's some piecing. I'm not sure what the piecing would be. Unless we're just talking about putting the blocks together themselves, because I don't think I saw anything in here that looked like, traditional squares and triangles piecing. It is inscribed, and but maybe not a signature because it says maker unknown. So, and interestingly, they feel like this one was made in Illinois. So it is not a Baltimore album quilt. I mean, I can say that it's an album quilt, but not a Baltimore album quilt. Okay, moving right along. It's another bars quilt. Now this one is going in the opposite direction. So but I still believe that formula for the width of fabric comes into play here because you can see the fabrics are repeated. But this is a case, I think, the maker had access to a number of these chintz prints, and just made, sort of made the most of these prints. This one right here, it's sort of green and bluish. I think I've seen that one in the wild because the colors really attracted me. Yeah, so like you can see this repeats up here, this repeats up here, and so on. So I think they each repeat 3 times, except for that sort of greenish one. Yeah. So I really like this one just because you don't often see chintz, or at least I haven't often seen chintz like this, where it's just strips, but a lot of them. This is multiple fabrics versus taking like two, the way we saw in the other one. I also like the fact that, see, the primary pattern is called bars, but they do have the alternate pattern, which is strippy. I hear a lot of people, say strippy, and I kind of always think of that as being like more of a modern term, but you know, could it be a Pennsylvania term? I don't know. So this one, it says probably made in the US. And I think that's really like the question could be because these are chintz, 1800 to 1840. A lot of chintz was getting dumped in the US, but there was a lot of chintz going on in England and France too. So, I think there's always a chance that this could have been made, across the pond. This was 110 by 89 inches. So this is a big one. And knife edge again. Knife edge. It's not a bad, knife edge is not a bad way to do binding. Okay, guys know I have recently gotten really obsessed with Delectable Mountains. And one of the cool things I don't think I mentioned about this book, and I'll probably do something separate with Delectable Mountains later. But one of the cool things that they do in this book, let me find a page and I could show you. Of course, am I going to find it? Yeah. So they will literally have a gallery. So they have the primary quilts that like we've been looking at as like the big pictures. And then they have, let me go back to my big screen so you can see. This is so cool. They have these gallery images. And this right here is their other Delectable Mountain quilts that are not featured in big pictures here. But I can go look up all of these Delectable Mountain quilts as well. So every section of this book where they're getting into a specific type of quilt, they then have a whole bunch of their other galleries. So there's a whole Baltimore Album Quilts gallery in here. There's just, pages of really cool stuff. So they're almost like thumbnails, but they're bigger than thumbnails. So I think this book was well worth waiting for, and the price I paid. So back to this Delectable Mountains. So this one was interesting. We do know the quilt maker's name, Isabella McKern Campbell. Date range 1830 to 1850. It's 92 by 92 inches, and made in Highland County, Virginia. Which I think must be in Southern Virginia. There's a whole bunch of counties down there that growing up, I was literally in college before I had heard of some of the little towns in Virginia, because Virginia is a big state. In any event, Delectable Mountains. I'm obsessed with this because Dr. Dunton was obsessed with this. And this one is a particular variation. There's a bunch of different, ways that these get put together. And we're going to look at another one in a minute. But this one is just so simple. And typically they are just two colors. Although we're going to see one that's not. And this looks like it's a blue polka dotted fabric. Which honestly are hard to date. Dotted fabric is hard to date. Unless you can kind of look at the dyes. You can figure out from the dyes. Because dots, checks, stripes, these are all things that were always made. So when you've got something so simple, it's sometimes hard to date if you don't have other ways to date. So yeah, and last night I was gonna start cutting out a block, to make a block, but instead I did the curves, the stems. So later this week, perhaps by Thursday, I might have the beginnings of one piece. So anyway, there, and of course I'm sitting here saying to you guys that I hate triangles. I got to do a lot of triangles. So probably going to hate triangles even more. Or maybe I'll start to like them. Maybe I'll get good at them. It is certainly easier to hand piece triangles than it is to do them on a machine. one of the challenges with triangles, besides getting their points to match, is um, the fact that you have a bias edge, and that bias edge can stretch. And that's part of the reason why sometimes points don't match, is because it's stretched a little bit. So 1830 to 1850 on this. I think I probably mentioned that. And let's look at the binding. Back folded over to the front. So this one, I thought this one was so interesting because so it's 1830 to 1850, 95 to 88 inches, so a little bit smaller. The way that they have used the fabrics, I think, is absolutely amazing. So this pattern is called a four-pointed star. And I've seen contemporary quilts that make use of this. I can't quite tell how many fabrics are in here. It's definitely two, obviously, but I feel like there's maybe a third one in here. But in any event, there is at least one that I think might be a pillar print, because look, you can see what looks like a pillar to me in these pieces here. And then you have these pieces that have this, like, I can't tell if it's like a giant polka dot or almost like a hexagon. And then there's these big white flowers. So I don't know if those are two different fabrics, or if, that was a fabric unto itself that had lots of different pattern. So you've got these extremely patterned fabrics, and the way that they possibly fussy cut them, at least the red, and then piece this stuff together. Look how it like almost vibrates into the center, and the center is red, and then you've got this sort of black and red. I don't know, it just reminded me so much of modern quilts, like sometimes the Japanese quilts that kind of have this optical illusion about them. Yeah, I thought this one was so cool, and so, looked so modern. But 1830 to 1850, right? Possibly made in Philadelphia. And then the binding, this is a straight applied binding. So this is a separate binding that would have been cut straight of grain and all around the edges. And the corners look pretty square. Sometimes what you'll see on some less successful quilts, even though they come to like they're square, right? People still were really bad at binding. And I mean, I can attest to this. I'm terrible about making a mitered corner. They would just kind of turn the corner like and it would be like, it would kind of round the corner off, and the binding would be kind of messy. This one looks like it might have had a mitered binding. Let's see if we can get in there. It's hard to get right into the corner. Yeah, it's hard to see. It's a very, very tiny binding. I can't tell, really. It could go either way. But like, what amazing layout. What an amazing design layout. So, alrighty. Lo and behold, it's another Delectable Mountains. This one, we know the quilter's name was Jane Gibb, and possibly made in Illinois. The dimensions are 95 by 82, so this one's a little bit smaller. But this one, oh, and this also has applied binding. So you can actually see that color on the edge. But look at all of these little individual Delectable Mountains blocks. So these are just, she's just the white or the off-white and whatever fabric, to make each block. And then she's put them together like this, which is, it's a variation. It's very different from this one, right? It uses the same block. Of course, this one's got this center that's different, but how different that looks. And I just, I love a scrappy scrap. This has a lot of light blue, and then this kind of like buff color. And so I think that's one of the indicators of the date. Although no, that the fact that they know the quilt maker's name, I think certainly helps with the date as well. But that 1840s sort of time period, from what I understand, that buff and blue was really popular. So you see a lot of that in this quilt, assuming that some of that buff color isn't like a faded other color. Um, so yeah, I thought this one was so very neat. There is another one in the book that is similar. So these are turned on point. The other one in the book is turned they're straight piece, they're the blocks are piece like regular blocks, not turned on point. So it then has an even different look. And that one sometimes has a different name to it when the blocks are turned. I can't remember what it's called. You guys might know. But in any event, there's so many patterns that are like this. Just depending on, you make that basic block, and then depending on how you put it together, is you end up with something that's so different looking. Two makers could make the same quote unquote pattern, but end up with something so different from each other. And I'm starting to think, if I do get going on some Delectable Mountains, I'm kind of liking this layout. This one, it's pretty simple, but I picked this one because do these strips of geese not give you kind of like, they kind of give me an optical illusion effect. And I don't know how it's showing up on your screens if you're getting this, but these ends, like, so the direction the points are going of the geese looks like they get wider as you get to the end, particularly these two in the middle. But they are 100% the same. They are 100% one skinny strip. But it just has that optical illusion about it. And then also there's some fantastic fabrics in here. And I like being able to get up even closer in these. This red and then this buff color look like they might be the same colorway or the same print, different colorways. So that's interesting. But yeah, it's just, and I mean the movement, it almost like hurts your eyes a little bit, but it's got such good design fundamentals in my opinion that it works. Even though it kind of makes your eyes kind of so oh, you gotta refill the bird feeder. Oh my goodness. -15 with wind chill. Ah, Marianne. You guys living in the Midwest and these cold northern states, I don't know how you do it. Okay, so this one is Sarah Headley. This one is 96 by 98 inches. Date is 1830. Is it 1838? So because it's inscribed, my guess is it has a date on it. We also have, it says back folded over, tucked in. So that's a knife edge. It's not really a back folded over. It's a knife edge. It's tucked in. So cool, cool, cool. Very pretty. Okay. This one blew me the hell away. Maker unknown. The primary pattern is called Lover's Links or the Lover's Chain. 1830 to 1850. How modern does this look, you guys? And I'll be honest, I'm not 100% sure like what the construction is like. How this is made. I think I want to go find it because I'm oh no, Druid. You're in the car bringing it up to temperature to charge the battery. Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry. You're out in the country too. Oh, you guys. I think that this one, I think it is probably this kind of funky shape in the middle, and then these sort of like fat orange peel shapes, and then these kind of straight shapes, I think, but I'm not sure. I really and truly don't know how this quilt goes together. And I want to find out. Um, so Ben Venom, he's a modern quilt maker, contemporary quilt maker. His stuff could not be any more different than this, but he does do a chain link kind of look, and he does like it's like a raw edge, but he does like a tight zigzag around it. It's almost like a satin stitch around each of his applique shapes. So that's how he's constructing his. Like he could literally cut these things out as like wiggly lines and um put them together. But I just don't know. I don't know what to say about this. And obviously the quilting itself, like the quilting itself follows, these curves and, you know, gives the impression that these pieces are linked together. I would say out of all of these quilts I'm showing you today, this one is the one that knocked me on the floor. Um, and I mean, two fabrics. One of them is kind of this silly putty pink. I'm, guessing. This is pretty much what it looks like in the book, but colors can be funky. Um, and then this, I would venture to guess this pinkish color might actually be a little print. I can't really tell. We can't get in close enough, but I suspect it could be a print. Um, but yeah, I want to find out how this is made because this just blows my mind. And then we're not even looking at the border of this is like whole different fabrics. Of course, you can see the boo-boo here in the corner. That happens a lot where the border doesn't quite come together. But the border, I think, kind of also lends this really interesting, like, it's almost like you have this like crazy, like a big net, because this is sort of a netted kind of, if this design was actually made out of actual string or yarn, it would sort of be a net. And it's almost like you have these zigzaggy things are tenter hooks, like pulling the net open. And I know that sounds crazy, but that's just like when I saw this, I was like, oh, this is so interesting. Um, so yeah, I'm gonna figure this one out. Now, will I make one? Probably not, but I'm gonna figure it out. So what did we say? This has got an applied binding. So, probably I'm sitting there saying earlier in the 19th century, you have a lot of front to back, not as much applied binding, but then all these quilts have proved me wrong. So, it's probably 6 one, half dozen the other, but, yeah, I don't know what else to say about this quilt other than I love it. I want to know how they did it. Now, I could not show you how to make teeny tiny stems today without showing you this. Um, this very well could have been one of the quilts that we looked at recently. After a while, they all start to look alike. I don't think it was. I think everything we looked at recently was here in Maryland, or actually here in our museums. But this one, Elizabeth Ann Gorsuch. Gorsuch is definitely a Maryland, Baltimore name. We have a Gorsuch Road not far away from me. And it is saying this was made in Maryland. This has got applique, cording and stuffing, and embroidery. And then also says pieced, but again, I look at these and I'm like, I don't know where the piecing is, unless they just mean putting the blocks together in terms of piecing. 102 by 102 inches, so it's a big one. 1840 to 1850. We didn't really need to look at the date range to know that if this is a true high style Baltimore quilt, it would have been made 1840 to 1850. So, but like some of those that we looked at the other day, I mean, just good grief. Like, look at this stuff. You've just got layers and layers and layers and layers of applique. This cornucopia, I love how it's multicolored. You typically see them as like either one or two colors. Um, these wreaths and baskets, like this basket. I know we looked at that basket. That sort of basket had a very definite like hand in it. There was somebody designed that basket, and there are a lot of them in Baltimore album quilts. This one looks like it might be using a rainbow fabric here. Kind of looks like it to me. And then these little inclusions. So because these are on point, you have that half triangle, half square triangle that you have to fill in with something, or it'll just be plain, plain backing. This quilter has filled in with triangular shaped like sprays of flowers. I mean, this is like a tour de force, right? Um, Grapes with all the little curly cues. I mean, I just like, oh, and these are probably pretty big blocks. These are probably like those 16-inch, 16, 18-inch blocks, like really big ones. Um, yeah, and I also love this design detail, the fact that the borders actually are broken here. So the borders are just like kind of corner pieces that come all the way almost to meet in the center. But they are different. Like you can look and see all of these flowers are all so different. Now, it seems that they're repeated, but oops, but there's a lot of different. um, and how successful that is, right? This is amazing. Somebody with a lot of time on their hands, right? A rich lady. So again, look at this and then look at this one. This one is so much more simple, so simplified compared to that other one. Um, yeah. So I think it's fun sometimes to kind of compare these. Okay. This one, I don't know that there's necessarily anything like super special about flowers and urns because we see these in all kinds of quilts. You know, red and green, of course, red and green quilts, 1860s, you've got these different dyes coming out and of course turkey red being like so popular. But the reason why I picked this one out is because if you like kind of like pull yourself back from it and don't look at the fact that it's flowers and urns, it's got this really really interesting like secondary kind of pattern about it. It kind of reminds me of like like oriental carpets, like Turkish rugs and stuff. You look at those and it the undulating designs in there and the repeated designs, you end up with something that's almost like a secondary pattern. um but then you can kind of get in there tighter and see each individual flower and leaf, and that's kind of what this reminded me of because there's a density to it. There's not a lot of white space, and where there is white space, it sets off these pieces. So I was really looking at this kind of more as like surface design than the quilt part of it. So I do know a name, Jenny Cleland, possibly made in Pennsylvania. There's a inscribed or signature, so that's why we know a date and name, I suppose. 1861, which is prime time for these types of quilts. Embroidered piece and hand, I'm assuming like applique, yeah. I mean, this is a time period when there could have been a machine involved, but more than likely it wouldn't have been. So, and then applied binding. And it looks like the binding is, oh, no, maybe not. I was going to say it looks like it's the same green, but I don't think it is. It's a darker green. But look at all of those little berries. I have a couple of quilter friends who do, kind of intense applique like this, and they were like, "Oh, if you have like 200 berries to make, you just do like 20 a day, and then in 2 weeks you'll be done." I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" There are some tricks to doing berries, using starch, using mylar template material, etc. You create these things and you can use the iron to do them quickly, but they're still very labor intensive. And at this time period, 1860s, this lady didn't have, um, was it Kay's magic circles or this quilting magic spray? Like, she had an iron probably that she heated in the stove and, or in the fireplace, and some fabric and scissors. So the fact that she made all of those little berries, and from this perspective they look um pretty good, pretty reasonably equally sized, etc., etc. So I know, and I can't even imagine how many of them there are in this quilt. um let's see, one, two, looks like there's about 15 berries per frond, whatever those are. And then, my gosh, how many of those are there? So 10 just on that one side. And, right? Is that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10? Yeah. So that's 150 right there. 300. I would say we could be looking at about 1,000. 1,000, give or take, maybe a little less than that, of these little berries. Wow. Okay. And then the last one. It's another Delectable Mountains variation. This one I saw at the last minute, and I love it because it is not only Delectable Mountains, it's got hearts in it. And I just love the fabrics and the colors. The color combination I just love. So, possibly made in New Jersey. We don't know who made it, but it does say inscribed, so I'm guessing, well, I don't know. Because it says inscribed, but we only have a date range, so I'm not sure what is inscribed. 1850 to 1870, and applique and piecing. Binding is an applied binding. So, but oh goodness, look at these fabrics. They're so pretty. Now, I would say this is an example of perhaps a less successful quilt, because you can see here, look at this one. This is not square. Now it looks like there's some writing in here. So right here there must be names written. Oh, I wish we could. Oh, it says stamped, hand inked and stamped. So, yeah, it's still very charming. I still really like this, but yeah, this is not the finest piecing that you've ever seen. But yeah, this pink, this none of these look like solids. Um, I think this brownish color looks like a check. That looks like it's maybe a check or a plaid. Um, this pink and red, the red you can definitely see is like a little pattern on there. The blue is a check. I can't tell with the pink, but I bet this is like a, probably not a double pink necessarily. It could be a double pink, but it's more pink than cinnamon, right? And then this kind of orangey tan color, I can't tell what that is. That could be a solid. But the blue appears to be maybe some kind of little pattern. There's definitely a pattern here in this little device. Oh, we see some more inking. So I'm guessing those are names. They've got to be names. But I suppose that they can't figure out, if any of those names are the maker. So hence why it says maker unidentified. But yeah, this is a really fun quilt. And I kind of wonder, because it's got these names inked on it, it could be the product of multiple people. And that's why you end up with pieces that don't, they're a little cockeyed. But my gosh, look at it. It came together and it appears to lay flat. So bravo. And these are historically the quilts I love to look at because, I mean, come on. Even with the funky mess somewhere in it, it still lays flat and it is still generally square or rectangular the way it was intended to be. And so if they can make that happen, I would say 2 thumbs up. This is a successful quilt. Even if you want to get nitpicky and look in there and say, well, this, none of these corners match and da 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 da. They got this thing to lay flat. That in and of itself is very important. So yeah, this is a fabuloso quilt in my opinion. So Marianne, your dog wanted to stay out and play. And the chickadees are practically picking walnuts out of your hand. Yeah, I guess at this time period, the birds and stuff, they're eager when we feed them because they don't have to scrounge in the cold. And I think, did we talk about, I think on Stitch and Glitch, we talked about dogs and how dogs just love the snow. Whereas my cats, you open the door and they go, no, thank you. They're not outdoor cats, but sometimes they'll want to dart out, when the weather's nice, but no. You know what I'm even noticing in here? The hearts are even different sizes in some places. So, that makes me think, this could be a situation where multiple people are involved. So it appears to me that the block itself is, you've got the delectable mountain, and then on the other corner is the heart. So that's what is making the hearts come together. So, well, that was the last one. These were fun quilts. I hope you liked them. Like I said, sometimes I just pick up a book and I look through it and I'm like, these are amazing quilts. I have to look at them more. So we're probably going to do a lot more of this. Because I have a big chunk of lovely new books that I haven't spent anywhere near enough time on. Okay. So before we go today, we have our next book to talk about. So we have 2 choices here. One is American Quilts by Elizabeth Wells Robertson. And I won this one at the silent auction at this last AQSG seminar. I can't remember who this book belonged to. It belonged to somebody whose name we should know. Let's see. Oh, Bettina Havoc. Yeah, she's a former president of AQSG, and I think she's written a number of books. I need to take care of this book before we get into it because it's a little, the dust jacket's a little scrappy. This one has what looks like a pretty decent gallery in it of pictures. They are all black and white, but they do look like pretty decent pictures. And it's a good amount of text. And it's interesting because this book it kind of reminds me of Marie Webster's book a little bit. There's not a whole lot, really not a whole lot of narrative in here. It's a lot more pictures. So, for that reason, I was kind of thinking we might go on to this one next because it'll be another short one. So there's that one. We will read both of these books this year. We will get to them. I need a librarian. Knows how to do those pretty wraps that they put on the library books. Okay. So got that one. So Elizabeth Wells Robertson, American Quilts, which we've done a lot of British, but then we have more British. So Avril Colby's Patchwork. Now we read Avril Colby's Quilting. It's probably been 2 years ago that we read that. It's been a while. This one looks a little bit different. The way she's laid it out. And, her quilting book, which was written in the 70s, did so much history. It was basically like quilting in the British Isles since the beginning of time, and it started with armor. And it was a lot. It doesn't look like she does that in this book. She kind of has a little bit of a um kind of like an introduction of history. And then at the end of the book she gets back into history, but there's some really interesting topics in here. So, these are your choices. Patchwork by Errol Colby or American Quilts by Elizabeth Wells Robertson. So I will post this. Okay, so Marianne is saying American Quilts. It's probably get out of the UK for a little while, back into America. That's kind of where I'm leaning, but if you guys have any thoughts, I will also post it on the page. The quilt nerding page, or quilt nerding. Well, I guess I could post it on the quilt nerding page too, but on the Cake TV page, I'll also post it on quilt nerding. Why not? So yeah, we'll get to both of those. And actually, here's something that's really interesting. This quilt, I saw a message that somebody the other day at AQSG is looking for this quilt because this book does not it says the front jacket design is reproduced from a cotton quilt 1810 containing a central panel printed from a polychrome woodblock designed to commemorate the golden jubilee of George III. In colors of dark red and russet, bright and dark blues, greens, canary yellow. It is lined with calico and interlined with sheep's wool. But nobody knows where the quilt is. So, somewhere in the UK, certainly. But anyway. Yeah, okay. So, it sounds like we've got 2 votes for America. Will probably be the direction we go, but I'll still post it anyway if anybody's got anything to say about that. So if we do that one first, and then we'll do patchwork, and then we'll be in a situation where I've got to find another book. So, like I've said before, if you guys know of anything that you'd like to dive into, again, remember, I don't do living or recent authors because of copyright, but I would say anything before 1970. I've still a copyright issue, but I feel like people are less likely to come after me if they're more than 50 years and also dead. So I think probably, I do know that Carrie Hall's family, her descendants are still kind of, at least at one time, were still very protective of her work, in terms of her estate. But I feel like many of the families of some of these authors, either they really didn't have an extensive family, or nobody's pushing back on audio versions of their books. So all right, guys, well, it is close to 4:00 my time. We spent a good amount of time on those IQM quilts, so I will see you on Thursday. But tomorrow, Jill and I will be back quilt nerding on YouTube. So hopefully, if you follow us there, the book we're reading is Mauve, How One Man Invented a Color That Changed the World. And it's funny, now I've been super paying attention to where mauve shows up in my reading. Anywhere that I run into mauve, I'm like... Because in my mind, mauve was always an 80s color, right? And I think Jill and I have talked about that. It's like, the Color Me Beautiful of the 80s. Mauve is like one of those colors. So anyway, we're having fun with it. So you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Again, if you're in the US, you may be enjoying a federal holiday if your work follows the federal holiday schedule. But otherwise, yes, stay warm. Oh my gosh, especially you guys in the cold regions. Some of our dear friends in California are not here today, but they're always poking me about the weather being in the 60s. But yes, have a wonderful week, and I will see you guys soon. Mwah! Bye!